welcome to the Non-Believer Bible Club. If you've been listening to every episode so far, then you know that today, even today, we have reached episode 6.
Who cares?
I've been doing this once a week for 6 weeks with the 6th episode. So far, the podcast has been very easy to do, very satisfying, and very fun. The Christian Bible is an intimidating work, and it's interesting to just start to break it apart piece by piece. I already know so much about all the other books I haven't read yet. Very interested to see what it'll be like when I do read them. But even so far as I am in Genesis, the insight that I've been given into this religion has been a lot more than I guess I thought I would get at first. The interesting thing about Christianity is that it really does give you everything up front. That made it very easy for the scholars who would eventually connect the Old Testament to the New Testament, connecting the plot threads, finding the through lines. Honestly, considering how long it took to get to us, it's amazing the thing is coherent at all. In previous episodes, I talked about the different writers of the Bible, but I don't think that I made it clear enough that it wasn't just one writer for the priestly source, for the Deuteronomist, the Yahwist, or the Elohist. These are different groups of scribes transcribing the old documents that they had, starting from around 1200 BC, moving forward through the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple, the Exodus before that. These are all hugely significant events in Jewish history, and somehow the Tanakh was able to survive through all of them and have an intelligible story structure after that. Amazing, improbable, and yet here we are. Before we continue with the adventures of Abram, I'm going to go over one thing that I noticed up to this point. It's something that I've brought up before in the second episode. I happened to be reading the Aeneid a couple days ago, and I just so happened to be exactly at the point when Aeneas decides that instead of staying and fighting, he's going to survive, lead his family away, and then he ends up becoming the leader of the fleeing Trojans. This is line 846 of Book 2, the final hours of Troy in my Aeneid, translated by Robert Fagles. So Creusa cries, her wails of anguish echoing through the house. Oh, I didn't set this up at all. So Aeneas' wife is upset that he's going to go fight and die, go down with the ship, so to speak, as Troy burns to the ground, leaving behind her, his son, Iülus, and Aeneas' father, Anchises. Her wails of anguish echoing through the house when, out of the blue, an omen strikes, a marvel. Now, as we held our son between our hands, and both our grieving faces, a tongue of fire, watch, flares up from the crown of Iülus' head, a subtle flame licking his downy hair, feeding around the boy's brow, and though it never harmed him, panicked, we rushed to shake the flame from his curls and smother the holy fire, damp it down with water. They see this as what it is, clearly a sign from the gods. What happens next? Anchises says, Almighty Jove, if any prayer can persuade you now, look down on us, that's all I ask. If our devotion has earned it, grant us another omen, Father. Seal this first clear sign. No sooner said than an instant peal of thunder crashes on the left, and down from the sky a shooting star comes gliding, trailing, a flaming torch to irradiate the night as it comes sweeping down. We watch it sailing over the topmost palace roofs to bury itself, still burning bright in the forests of Mount Ida. Now, why am I reciting this passage from the Aeneid to you, my dear creepy readers? Let's hear an excerpt from last week's episode. In this specific verse, we get lightning and then the mountains smoking. So we see fire, torch, lightning, and smoke as signs of God. So Aeneas, in this moment, has been given a sign from the gods, and specifically, Jove, or Jupiter, or Zeus. And what Zeus tells Aeneas to do is to go, to leave that land from which he is being driven and found a new kingdom which he is promised, an empire without limit. So here we have these two different gods, the God of Abraham and Zeus, both with similar promises to specific men, both showing their power in a similar way. Zeus sends lightning and a comet to strike near Mount Ida. In Exodus 20:18, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, and when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. Curiously similar imagery. Now, when we left our reading last week, Abram had awakened from his fever dream after a ritual with God. Genesis 15:17. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. God makes his presence known with an image of fire, with a torch or a lightning, and a furnace. Interesting when I think of the fall of Troy being the burning of Troy. So we see the power of fire to destroy and to light the way, something we touched on last time, but then we see again in other works. What does this mean? I guess man has a very specific idea of where power lies, and when he envisions God, that God is an entity that wields that power. A ring of fire appears over Iulus's head. He has been marked as the one who will succeed the Trojans, who will father the Romans. He's been marked by power. And of course, fire being the most ancient power that we know, what Prometheus was said to have given us in the Greek legend that spurred us towards civilization. We are obsessed with fire, and we are obsessed with God. We will see where these obsessions lead us as we continue with the adventures of Abram, as he tries, in spite of God's promise, to produce an heir. All right, let's go! Sarai, being barren, gives Hagar to Abram. Oh, so last week we got into some interesting adventures. I know I usually have the music into the reading of the Bible verse, but give me just a second. I've been listening to some interesting lectures all week, and one of them from Jordan Peterson analyzing the Genesis stories gave me a little bit of insight that I think I missed. He described the Abrahamic stories as a story of adventure insofar as it's a call to action. Now, if we look at the text, Abram was about 80 years old when he is told to go forth from his father out of the land of and go unto the land of Canaan, where he will become the patriarch of a new great nation. And along the way, he gets into all these kind of side adventures, like the one in Egypt, where he's accosted by Egyptians who want to bang his wife. And then he goes and engages in a war, the war of 4 kings versus 5 kings. And he's kicking ass, he's rescuing a lot. All of a sudden, he's doing things. And Peterson spoke of this as a kind of coming of age, almost. It's the idea that you have to go out and search and, more importantly, do if you're going to become the person that you have to be. So God makes his promise to Abram that he will father a great nation, but he doesn't give him the nation right away. He sort of makes him work for it, is the idea. And only after he's done these fantastic things does Abram become the kind of person that God will bless with that. Now, to anybody who knows what's coming next, Abram is going to get a little antsy. He doesn't want to wait. And that doesn't necessarily lead to good things. Without much ado, let us continue. Chapter 16 of Genesis. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. And she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I always say behold like it's a good thing. This is more like, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. Not a lot of arguing from Abram. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. He's been there 10 years. I mean, no wonder he's getting antsy. And gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife. Ooh, I like the title of this next part. Hagar runs away. I wonder what happens. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong. Oh, man, this was her idea. My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. Oh, man. Wow. Well, that's not very fair. That poor maid. Okay, you have to have sex with Abram now. Why'd you have sex with Abram? Get out of here! And the angel of the Lord found her a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid. I don't think she's her maid anymore. Whence camest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. Whoa, second covenant happening? And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou, God, seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Bir Lahairoi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. Okay, so wording of King James may get in the way yet again. I just consider it part of the challenge. So she says, And she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou, God, seest me. Now the words that she uses in Hebrew are El Roi. El Roi usually translated as the God who sees me, for El was one of the names of God. El, El, and then the Roy, meaning to see, which comes back in the name of the well, Bir Lahai Roy, meaning the well of him that lives and sees me, or the well of the vision of life. What's important is her life is seen by God. Even Hagar, the handmaid, the Egyptian, the non-Israelite, she is seen by God. I'm actually surprised to see this kind of thought this early on, because I know that God's chosen people are the Israelites, and it's to the Israelites that he gives favor. But I think the universal appeal of Christianity specifically is in that the grace that God delivers to his people extends to everyone on the planet. because this idea is so often attributed to Jesus, I guess I saw this as more of a New Testament thing. So I'm pretty surprised to see this in the Old Testament. God's eye watches over all. This is a small instance, but it's a small instance of something monumental in both this book and the overall success of the entire religion. Okay, moving on. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. Chapter 17. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. Abram's like, yeah, I've heard it. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. Wow. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Oh shit, I guess he's serious now. He just gave him a new name. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee, and to thy seed after thee, the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep, between me and you and thy seed after me. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep, between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised. Ugh! And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. Ah, but why? Why the foreskin? It's non-believer research time!
Non-believer research time, oh yeah! Oh.
I have returned. I have seen many images, many images, to bring you the information that I have. Appreciate all I have sacrificed for you. According to BibleReference.com, the ritual of circumcision presents several important symbols of our relationship to God. The process involves a circle, a common symbol of eternity and continuity. Through this circle, the next generation would pass via reproduction. It involves the setting aside or removal of a naturally born part of the person. It creates a permanent change in the person, making that commitment. It's an outward, visible representation of a spiritual covenant. See, this is most of the language that I'm seeing about circumcision. People are like, well, these are the good things about it. But when it comes to why specifically that, people just seem to say, well, because God asked. I guess I'm all right with that. Here's some more info from reasonstobelieve.org. Besides saying that first and foremost, circumcision signified the covenantal relationship between Yahweh and Abraham and his descendants, I thought this was interesting. The medical accuracy of the covenant of circumcision. Specifically, God commanded Abraham to perform circumcisions on the 8th day after birth. As physician S.I. McMillan points out, this is the ideal time to carry out the procedure because it ensures that the infant's blood readily clots after circumcision. For the first 4 days after birth, an infant has a limited amount of vitamin K and clotting factors in its blood. On day 5, the level of these materials increases, reaching the maximum level, you guessed it, on day 8. Additionally, God commanded that a flint knife be used to perform the circumcision. According to Macmillan, this practice is significant because the act of sharpening a flint knife removes the surface layer, leaving behind uncontaminated stone that would have minimized infection. One has to marvel at the Bible's medical prescience. Given the pre-scientific understanding of the ancient Near East, Abraham could not have possessed this medical insight apart from divine wisdom. Interesting notes, reasonstobelieve.com. With that in mind, shear away any other thoughts of the matter. We shall continue. Sorry. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generations, he that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed. Interesting. God's still cool with slave labor at this point. I guess that was a ingrained part of their society. Man, this God just surprises left and right. He sees the problems of Hagar. He tells you to circumcise your slaves. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money, must needs be circumcised. I can't tell you enough. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man, child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. Wow. How ironic. By not cutting off the foreskin, he is cut off from the people. All right, let's keep it coming. And God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai, thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Ye, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face, and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? And Abraham said unto God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. Also translated as, And Abraham said to God, If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. But no can do. That's the child he tried to have when he wasn't listening to God. And God said, Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. Oh, named by God. That's cool. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him. Oh, yeah, that's nice. I thought I was going to leave him out. And will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget. And I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. Whew, that's cool. God went up. Whew. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house. And he's like, All right, guys, you heard the man. And circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the self-same day as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old, and 9, when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Yeesh. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old, when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house, born in the house, and bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. Circumcision party. Chapter 18. After all that circumcising, the Lord appears to Abraham. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. In the tent door, it's so specific. So I guess, so we can get a breeze, but he's not really outside. Like how absurdly specific is this text? And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do, as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham run unto the herd, and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hastened to dress it. And he took butter and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. So these are 3 men, but it's also the Lord. It says, And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. Either way, Abraham is a very important person, at least in his own region. He's known as a man of wealth and means and power, and he's knelt to these guys. He's bowed before them and immediately sent his men to make a feast for them. So they have to be important. Ellicott's commentary for English readers explains the 3 men. Jewish commentators explain the number by saying that as no angel might execute more than 1 commission at a time, one of the three came to heal Abraham, the second to bear a message to Sarah, and the third. When we go back to the reading, you'll see what the third is here to do. More correctly, one was, quote, the angel of Jehovah, who came as the manifestation of God to Abraham, and the other 2 were his companions. Interesting. So it's God and 2 angels. The number 3 pointed also to the Trinity of persons in the Godhead, and is therefore read by our church as one of the lessons for Trinity Sunday. But we must be careful not to use it as a proof of this doctrine, lest the inference be drawn of a personal appearance of the Father and of the Holy Ghost, which would savor of heretical impiety. This is huge. I would love to explain exactly why overemphasizing the personage of God is so heretical. But maybe next episode, we will continue on with Genesis 18:9. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah, thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee, according to the time of life. Ooh, I know what that means. And lo, Sarah, thy wife, shall have a son. I'm guessing the time of life is 9 months. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, and well stricken in age. And it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. I see. That's a very respectful way to put it. Therefore, Sarah laughed within herself. That's great. She just laughs openly, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? She's disrespecting God, but she's still funny. And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. And the men rose up from thence, and looked towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham the thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. And the Lord said, Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now, and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. So the third angel has come to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And the men turned their faces from thence, and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. Cliffhanger ending. Reading is done for today. First, some context before I give you my final thoughts. Ellicott's Bible Commentary for English Readers is based on the writings of Charles Ellicott, an English Christian theologian who lived in the 1800s and died in 1905. His interpretation of the three men is interesting. One is God, and he is joined by two angelic companions. But the Talmud tells a slightly different story. If you remember, the Talmud is a collection of writings, hermeneutical writings of the Tanakh, which is the, for lack of a better term, Hebrew Bible. Of course, we do have a better term, and it's the Tanakh. So, in the Talmud, we find this quotation. The names of the angels were brought by the Jews from Babylonia. Now, during the Babylonian exile, in which most of the Jewish population was displaced after a conflict between Babylon and the Kingdom of Judah, Jewish scholars developed the names of the angels, which means that at the time which the book of Genesis was written, the angels were not named. So the three men, quote-unquote men, who visit Abraham are not explicitly named. In the Talmud, they are. The angels are Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Michael's mission is to tell Sarah that she will become pregnant with Isaac. Raphael's mission, to heal Abraham, which was confusing to me at first, until I remembered he's here to heal Abraham in a certain way, from a very specific kind of pain. And lastly, Gabriel is here to destroy Sodom. Let's not forget who lives in Sodom. There's a reason why Abraham ends up standing before God at the end of verse 22. I think something very important happened just before that. God says in verse 17, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Last time I talked about this Abrahamic section being very different than the previous sections, less metaphorical, more straightforward, kind of adventure and fun. But I'm seeing something that is also completely new. Now that God has named Abraham as the man to father God's chosen people, we're seeing something we've never seen before. God is allowing Abraham a little peek behind the curtain. And because I know this story, I know that Abraham's voice is going to be instrumental in what happens next. That's unimaginable. God is keeping a good degree of separation between him, her, it, and man. God speaks directly to Noah. You will do this. Death is coming. Do it. That's it. But with Abraham, he considers, will I hide what I do from him? Or will I allow him to comment? Will I allow him a measure of input? Absolutely incredible. Although this section of Genesis is different, I think it's one of the most exciting for me personally, because we're getting to see what happens when God gives man a little bit of leeway. We're getting both the God of power and vengeance smiting evil, while at the same time we're getting a God who's willing to think differently, even to ask his own creation, what do you think? I know that the Old Testament God is kind of legendary in his bloodlust and killing the people of the earth, and all falls beneath his might. This God is a pretty agreeable God. He has conversations. He's thinking. He's trying to think about what he can do differently. Absolutely fascinating. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Non-Believer Bible Club. Keep calm and foreskin on. I mean off. That's the covenant. It's got to come off.